All right, so the debate is already heated up with my panelists this morning, to whom we're looking to have the fundamental questions answered on multi-partisan freedoms of elections, especially in Uganda. Joining me to my immediate left is Dr. Sarah Birete, who's a political analyst. Doctor, good morning to you.
Good morning, and good morning, viewers out there.
It's a pleasure to have you. Then one who was able to witness these scenes for himself and leading the people of Kawempe, and incumbent, also new candidate for mayoral position of Kawempe Division, Mr. Emmanuel Serunjoji. Good morning.
Good morning.
Okay, so let's start from you to just give us the bird's eye on exactly how events unfolded leading to the brutality and the severance of response from the Uganda police.
Yeah, allow me to give you the genesis of what transpired yesterday. Everybody was aware that His Excellency Kyagulanyi Ssentamu will be in Kawempe Division on 24th. And the security operatives, all the security operatives were aware, and we held, they even called for harmonization meetings of how we are going to do everything. And I, in my capacity as the chairman of NUP in Kawempe, I represented the party, and I went with Comrade Nyanzi. We sat in a series of meetings. In those meetings, we agreed of how we are going to move. It was obvious that people will be in numbers, and that is not a question. Everybody was aware, and we are arranging for the numbers.
Allow me to interrupt there. When you say you agreed on how you'd be moving, what was that agreement and what was that roadmap of movement?
Yeah, as I told you, we had a series of meetings. The first one, which had the fewer members, we had the RPC, and we failed somewhere. And then we had to call for another meeting where we had the KMP, all the pieces of the area. But I started to sense something else when they brought in DPCs from Kachiri, which is all surrounding divisions. And I knew that it's not going to be a good business, or it will not be as usual, because when you bring in other DPCs, it means you bring in many police officers from even these different stations, well as it was a Kawempe issue. So when we sat in that meeting, which was attended even by the KMP of Kampala, we agreed that we will start from the headquarters and then move to the venue.
In a procession?
Of course, he knew the president can't move alone, and you can't deter people who have love to their president. And those were a few of the people we had yesterday at the venue. You could tell that there were so many people at the venue, even by the time we arrived, but some of them, and what I want to assure you and to tell you, the fact is, the people we moved with were fewer than the people who were at the venue. And we moved. But these people started tear gas before even we started the movements.
So as a planning committee, what solutions did you have, or what contingency plans did you have for the expected processions?
Yeah, they said that we should have less numbers of vehicles. In fact, they talked about vehicles. And I told them we will not have more than 15 vehicles as we are moving, because this is a president who has an executive, and as we as members, and they agreed. That was the issue. And the only reason, I think these people had an agenda even before, because this is something which can take even an hour from the headquarters to the venue. It needed about 15 minutes if we are moving in peaceful. NUP is very peaceful, I can tell you. You can tell and witness from the statements the president always utter when we are setting off. And you have heard yourself that he said we should move peacefully. That's what he always emphasized.
There's a picture that we have from the earlier video that we played. If my director can get the earlier video when Robert Kyagulanyi was heading all around the national unity platforms in Kavure. He was standing on his vehicle, and of course he was having that altercation with the officers on ground, and they were trying to direct him accordingly in order to engage with the headquarters, but also as they're heading out. And he puts up his hands ngakunga abantu to follow him. That in a way is calling people to follow him, which then means that he's calling the procession forth, which is against the guidelines by the Uganda police. One of them is explicit prohibition of processions during campaign periods. Candidates are required to meet their supporters at designated campaign grounds rather than moving in convoys. What was your contingency plan to avert that guideline by Uganda police?
Yeah, I appreciate your concern, but let me tell you, the prior arrangements were that when His Excellency Kyagulanyi comes back from Luzira, where he went first, he was supposed to hold a press conference inside the headquarters, and people were waiting. Some people were waiting, even pressmen were waiting. They were just in. So he had to wave them that the area arrangement has been abandoned because the security forces have refused him to enter because they told him no entry in the headquarters. So he had to tell them that the arrangement has been dropped and now we are heading to the headquarters, and that's what he did, if you saw that gesture. Okay. And it was not meant for only the people, but even for the pressmen who were already, who had already gathered for the press conference. And then that's how we started. But even before he came, they had started to torture people.
Mr. Serunjoji, I'm going to keep you on the hot spot.
I'm ready.
This was anticipated. And this in reflection of what we saw in 2021. I'm sure that you as the chairman of the committee that was spearheading this particular visit, you had to put in mind that how do we avert what happened in 2021? And so that's what I'm trying to get from the organizing committee, that what were the contingency plans to ensure that we don't have this conversation here today in 2025? Yeah,
in fact, I'm now contemplating dropping ideas of even engaging with the security officials because it has no meaning. It has lost meaning because we knew that the people would be there in numbers. And I'm still emphasizing my issue that what was done yesterday was uncalled for. Because that is something which takes like...
What did you expect the Uganda police to do? Because these are really extremely large numbers. They are affecting businesses and communities around, and people that have to go about their day's activity must not be interrupted by this. So what expectations did you have from the Uganda police?
The Uganda police were aware. And this is a one-day event, and even not a full day. It's just few hours. They had to adhere to what was going to take place, and they knew that let's leave this to pass. If you are walking in the dust and you don't have a vehicle which can put the mirrors up, you just stand there and say, at least within these few hours or minutes, I will be done with this. If you have ever driven a vehicle in a Maram road or a stretch which has no tarmac, and you can say, I will be done in just a few minutes. And this was one day event. And not even a full day, just a few hours. The police were aware that the numbers will be there, and how to manage the numbers professionally is what was needed. And they should have left the people to move freely and go to the venue, hold the rally, then we move to another venue. Just one day.
When you say they should have let people move freely, the guidelines are clear through the Electoral Commission and backed up by the Uganda police that processions are not allowed. And so that's a big question. Anyway, away from that, are there...
Yeah, let me tell you the processions. Let me talk about the processions you are talking about.
Look at those pictures. Have you already compiled a report on how many have been injured, those arrested, and related?
Yeah, we are still gathering information, and in my capacity as the chairman of course, by law, I'm the chairman of Security Committee, much as they don't allow me to do my duty, but they have to brief me, and even our people on the ground are giving us information. Maybe in a few days we'll be with a full report.
All right. Thank
But
you
on
so
procession,
much.
the procession they are talking about
Yeah.
is to move around. Then you are going, when you are going east,
Yeah.
then you start with moving west and the other. But
not,
we are going straight
that's not
to the
procession.
venue.
Procession, Mr. Serunjoji, means a big group of people following the candidate wherever he is.
But you know what
going.
we used to do, and that's what the reason why they brought that law. We used to move around the whole division if you are to be in Kawempe, and that's what we are not intending to do. We are just moving straight to the venue.
Okay. Dr. Sarah Birete, I know that you have been astonished by the pictures that you're seeing and what transpired yesterday. I would like to first pick your general mind on what you saw yesterday in line with free and fair elections 2026.
You know, first of all, the principles governing elections is that there should be freedom of association by the people, the voters, freedom of movement, including the candidates, freedom of expression, and freedom to disseminate campaign messages. So when you look at the events surrounding Kawempe campaigns, first is one would have expected that the teams would abide by the guidelines by Electoral Commission. Electoral Commission has been clear on the issue of processions. And this being an urban setup, you have to be mindful of other people using roads, other people going about their business. Campaign shouldn't end the lives of other people. So the parties need to be mindful of that and maybe send messages to their supporters. Because if I have a campaign event, for example, at Nachivubo, if I have a campaign event, maybe at Nambole, I think the onus is on the party, in this case NUP, to send messages that we are calling upon all our supporters to move straight to Nambole. Don't wait for the candidate at his home. Because that's part of the guideline. Don't wait for the candidate at his home. Don't look for the candidate at the office. Move to Nambole. That's where we shall hold our rally. That should be the responsibility of the parties. When you look at police now, you found yourself with crowds. Sometimes you wonder what is acceptable or not. I looked at the picture of an old woman who was tear gassed, and then a young man is picking her, and then I'm like, okay, so will other people come for the campaigns? That should be the concern of everybody. If we hold this rally and it doesn't go well, one, do you want to endanger your supporters? Two, did the police use reasonable force? When I see the tear gas, the major tear gas happened at the end of the rally, which I think was unfair. Because immediately the candidate stops speaking, then tear gas all over the place. You don't even understand the cause of that tear gassing. The statement of police does not add up. They mention about 7 issues. We were stoned at the headquarters, we were stoned at the roundabout, 7 people were injured, and the statement of police, to make matters worse, was first released by Andrew Mwenda. Andrew Mwenda sent a tweet before police issued a statement. So who drafted even that statement? And in what capacity was Andrew Mwenda communicating? So you find that the statements of police don't even mention the issues that we are discussing. It doesn't mention the procession. It doesn't mention the behavior of voters to wait in an ungazetted area for the rally. It is just mentioning stoning. We were stoned at the headquarters. We were stoned at the roundabout. 7 of our men are injured. How about the citizens who are injured? He doesn't even mention that. So the statement of police falls short of what one would have expected. But my call to the organizers, especially in congested areas like Kampala, Wakiso, and Mukono, Follow the guidelines. Insist that your voters should move to the venue. Instead of looking for the candidate at his home, hotel, or police, let them move to the venue and wait. I think that's what the guideline is about of the Electoral Commission.
What early signs of democratic regression are you observing?
Of course, our elections have always been marred by violence, and violence controlled by state agencies, not violence by the people. The state chooses when to use violence and when not to use violence. And what I find shocking, speaking from my sector, is that the Electoral Commission is been telling people, the few people that are accredited, we don't want you to observe elections in Kampala and Works. Whatever their agenda is, it is very worrying, it is very suspicious.
And this has been told to you in writing?
It has been told to one group which was accredited, applied to observe elections in hotspot districts. Because we have 4 hotspot districts.
Namely?
Kampala, Wakiso, Mukono, and Sembabuli in this election. So they were told, and when you are applying for observation, you list areas where you will observe elections. So the group had listed Kampala and Wakiso. And the Electoral Commission said, remove Kampala and Wakiso on your list. We don't want observation. So what is the agenda of the Electoral Commission? That they are blocking observation of elections in the most populated districts of Uganda. What is their agenda?
On that note, Afrobarometer reports of 2021 show that Uganda had the most violent election in decades. Could what we are starting to see in Kampala, because the districts that you've mentioned on are the districts that this particular party is and its presidential candidate are moving to next. And so it begs the question, could we see this year surpassing 2021 in terms of risk?
I think the 4 districts that I've mentioned, which we are closely monitoring, will have the worst incidences of electoral malpractices, of electoral violence in this election.
Okay.
Kampala, Wakiso, Mukono, Sembabuli.
All right. Thank you so much. We are equally joined by Paula Awich, NRM Director of External Affairs. Good morning, sir.
Good morning, and good morning to Sarah. I've already greeted my friend. Oh, happy to be here.
It's a pleasure to have you. Yesterday's violence is raising a lot of concerns in regards to state outreach, and it begs the question from your lenses and as one who subscribes to the ruling governing party, how do you make of the incidences that we saw yesterday?
How do I make of the incidences? It's a standalone topic. I will answer, but just briefly, I want to make a comment, then I come to what do I make. As I was coming in, I was seeing your topic, which was being run on the screen, the cost of political freedom. I think it's scary, especially at this time. The insinuation there is like there's no freedom in Uganda and people are struggling for it. The only issue, according to that topic, is at what cost, which I think is misleading. There's freedom, it is institutionalized, even from the grand norm, the Constitution, and other parliamentary acts, and in practice, with the organizations or institutions being put in place to ensure there's freedom. That's the Election Commission, Human Rights Commission, the courts of law, and everything. So I just wanted to comment that the topic which was running was misleading, and being a national media, a global media, I would advise the viewers not to take the topic seriously running. Also, about yesterday, my making and the making of my party is that it's not good. NRM wants a very peaceful election. Why we want a peaceful election is because we want the country peaceful. But also we have realized that a non-peaceful election works against us. I've told friends that we have done research. The week when President Museveni was in Germany and Honorable Chagulanyi was somewhere. That week ended uneventfully, no event. We did a research to ask people, where is Honorable Chagulanyi today? Nobody knew. 10 people. And we asked the same question to the people, where is Museveni today? He's in Jumani. They knew. So therefore, a violent election, if, for example, Honorable Chagulanyi got in conflict with the state in Mitiana, and they knew tomorrow is going to Umbende, people will know. So, both in the interest of the country.
Just to rewind a bit, what was the intention of the research you were doing?
The research, the intention was to have the impact on the visibility and popularity of candidates, especially the two leading candidates. That's what we found, that in the absence of conflict with the state, voters don't know and they don't care where he is. But so, therefore, for both national interest, which, as I said earlier, NRM has tried to institutionalize peaceful elections, from the Election Commission, funding it, giving it money, government gives, resourcing it and doing everything. We need a peaceful election.
Let me ask you, Paula, how does the NRM manage processions as your presidential candidate is traversing different parts of the country?
That is it. We do manage. For example, the Election Commission guidelines is what we are following, where President Museveni is supposed to be. Every day we follow. And it so happens that it is started in my hands. Why? Because the launch, President Museveni launched in Luero. That was not campaign. Because Election Commission still has timetable for him to go back to Luero. So the election practically started in my hands because we have a portion as top management, we have given regions. So I'm in charge Lango, the 10 districts. So it started in Amolata, and therefore I had to set a precedent. How? I go to Amolata, pin the posters of my candidates, send public address system in the villages, telling them where to be at what time. I go on radio stations. Thanks to NRM, there's radio stations nearly in every district, and I call them. The following morning, I leave it to God who comes. And they will come. By the time President Museveni is coming, our ground is full, no procession. And after the speech, he goes, no procession. Not because we would have a temptation of even other NRM candidates, say at parliamentary level or LC5, they would want to take the advantage of this crowd to move around with. We don't. After our rally, at every given location, they go. So President Museveni has been very disciplined in following the guidelines, including where there was some incidents where we didn't have a rally in a Lira and Kole. We let it pass because we said, this is the day Election Commission has given us. We therefore cannot arbitrarily say, since you missed a Tuesday, you come on Thursday. Say, we shall now ask Election Commission for new days, new dates. So we want a good and peaceful election. Now, there's an element of hooligans.
Before we go to the element of hooliganism, if the other political players in the same space were to adopt the strategies that you have used, one of them you've mentioned is that you do earlier rallying and mobilizing of the people.
Dispatching public address systems. Yeah,
dispatching public address systems. If the opposition was to adopt that, they would be arrested for doing that. If you have talked about you engaging local radio stations in order to, tell people where your candidate is going to be and at what time, the opposition is facing a lot of resistance from these radio stations because they fear to be locked down by UCC, or even some strong heads in particular districts that are saying no, do not give airtime to opposition members. So those are to the disadvantage of the opposition. So with that in mind, what would you recommend the opposition do to avoid processions thereafter, avoid incidences that lead us to this table, this discussion this morning?
On whether or not they use the radio, that is their capability. In that these are private radios. We also go and pay and talk. Now, if the private radio owners have not accepted any client, which I know they want money, then that is their business. Now, if it was an official position, like somebody has done it, then the remedy is still to pursue it with the Electoral Commission. But then a radio station is like a hotel. I just don't understand that Honorable Chagulanyi and his team are able to get hotels for accommodation, because if that was the extremism, they wouldn't be getting hotels. So the matters of radio station, if they think the prohibition came from us as a party, which we have no power over private radio, then they could still raise it up with the Electoral Commission. There should be a remedy. Now, I was telling you about hooliganism. Why? Because I've heard from Honorable Chagulanyi himself saying that, you see, the hooligans that is in us are planted. First, it is an acceptance that there's hooligans among them. Now, as to whether or not they are planted, that is another issue. But still, like Sarah was saying, if you realize then that what is causing confusion is actually a planted hooligans, then you should have disciplinary capacity.
The pictures running on the screen right there are pictures of an NRM procession, and this is where the president was yesterday. They're dressed in yellow and they are carrying the, the flags of the party and, the emblems of the party, really. That's a procession, wouldn't you say?
I haven't seen it.
Please replay it back for me. Dear director, please replay that picture for me again.
I was facing you.
Okay. Director, please replay that picture for me again. What would you refer that to? That
appears like, but now, that's Honorable Tuhari Jacqueline, like is a deputy national treasurer. As I said, we have been apportioned region.
Is that considered a procession or not?
No, the treasurer is allowed to.
No, I need to check the facts.
Respond. Yes, please.
No, you're telling me photographic interpretation.
No, this was yesterday.
But
this was yesterday.
It appears like.
Yeah, it
so,
appears
but what?
like.
Yeah, but what I was saying.
And they were doing it, and they were allowed to go through the city and the town as they were heading to where President Yori was yesterday in Rwanda and the other district, and there was we don't see any much police in that picture, even though police should be there to guide that procession. That's one. But still, even that procession is also part of the non-accepted processions, according to the Electoral Commission guideline and the Ugandan police. And so, is it fair to say that the NRM is privileged to state, institutions and the other political party players are not privileged to the same peace, law and order?
That's why I was saying we have zone areas, and that zone, Kigezi zone, is a zone for the Deputy National Treasurer, Honorable Jacqueline. So I have to check the facts. I don't know what explanation he would give in response to the guidelines of Electoral Commission. I don't know whether he would want to say we are in a preparatory meeting.
Unfortunately, we're not talking about the National Treasurer. We are talking about the procession.
Oh my God.
Yes.
Oh.
It's just a simple yes or no. Was it a procession? Or
no, it wasn't.
It wasn't a procession.
Yes.
What determines it not having been a procession?
So that's why I'm saying, I'm explaining, and you are really, really tying my mouth. I'm saying we need to check the facts in what we are saying. Suppose Jacqueline is saying this, and the number is not much as you see. Suppose she says these are a district executive committee member, which were from a meeting, and after a meeting we are heading to the procession. These facts need to be explained on its own. The number is not like you would see a number of a procession. You can see those actually can fit a district executive committee of a district, and they have been in a meeting in some other venue, and they are walking to the venue. So when I try to make facts, and you block me.
Okay.
But that is it. Now, I still have some other things. Sarah mentioned something about the issue of the Electoral Commission having addressed the group, and the group had applied and indicated they wanted to observe Kampala. Again, some of these things needs to be checked on a case-by-case basis, because I don't know whether the Electoral Commission has a guidelines for observation team. You could find, like they're saying, a guideline is to the effect that the observers in Kampala are already saturated, and therefore we want you to go to another place. Or in their guidelines, they could have said, since Kampala is contentious, we want international. Remember, African Union is coming. And I have already met African Union, and I believe they have met other political parties. I've met them because I'm the Director of External Affairs, and I met them with Honorable Rosemary, the Deputy SG. So the guidelines that is there, and I like to take it that it's our guideline. This is African Union guidelines, which was passed by heads of states in Durban in 2022, 2002. And it is our guideline. It is not imposed on us. Why is it our guideline? They are passed by our head of states. And we have been lucky to have a president who has had the democratic ability to stay for long. So it means that even him is the one who passed that guideline. So it is not a demand from opposition. It is not opposition demanding a level playground. It is what we set to do and what we must do.
All right, Mr. Serundoji, I returned to you, having allowed you to breathe. The realities are that the National Unity Platform has its strongest grounds in Kampala and the urban centers, to be exact. The drawing of the massive crowds we saw in Kawempe are just a testament to that. It begs the question, how prepared is the National Unity Platform to ensure that we do not have a repeat of this incident to the other urban centers that the candidate is going to be traversing?
Thank you so much. And I just want to highlight on some of the issues.
Before you highlight the issues, first respond to the question.
Okay, yeah. We are prepared. Of course, we know what is coming. And most of the problem we are facing is because we have many supporters. And one party which is controlling the security agencies and all institutions in Uganda is against that and is fighting us. And we are saying that we will go through. We talk to our supporters, as we have heard. We get prepared of whatever is coming or is before us, as we have seen, and then we move. Because in a country where we have a dictatorial governance, as we are witnessing now, when we talk about, someone tells you about going on the press. In fact, you are the one who has just witnessed what was happening, a procession of an organized procession, as my director has been saying here. An organized procession, when they also hold them. And he talked about the people who are taken to the venue or a certain ground. But I can tell you that it's on record that some of their supporters were involved in an accident, a foot accident, if you heard that, when they were being back from a distance, because they had come to. What does he have to say about that? It is evidence that people are failed from different places. That's what I told you.
Yeah.
But as the NUP, we are organized, not only in Kampala, but in the whole country.
Yeah, but we're talking about Kampala because the hotspot districts that were mentioned by Dr. Sarah here are going to be attracting a lot more crowd than what we saw in Kawempe. That was just a picture of what should be expected moving forward.
And I wanted to put records right. What happened? Much as it started with the procession, or what you call procession. For me, what I call that people were escorting the president. And if we are to talk about executive, I myself in the Kawempe division have an executive of more than 180 people. Because I have my executive as a district, then divisions have, and wards have. But what I'm telling you, the incident, much as it started on even before we started to move. Yeah. But they started tear gassing people in a peaceful mood when we are in at the rally. That's when they started tear gassing. When we are settled, in fact, my president was just starting to address the people. Then they started tear gassing as a way of intimidating our supporters. In fact, they were overwhelmed by our supporters, and they thought someone was following maybe on media, and they said, we are now trying to, they wanted to disperse even the rally, and that was not caused by procession, I can tell you. The only problem we have here is that the security agencies are given instructions and from someone and from one party, and we are ready to move. in that mood as these people are behaving, but still we know we will win.
Dr. Sarah, in this regard, there's of course the debate that we can't run away from is that the NRM feels it is weaker in Kampala Central especially than elsewhere, and therefore what we're seeing is them trying to control Kampala. Yet at the end of the day, when we look to the elective positions of leadership, there's more position in Kampala than meets the eye. And this has started repeated violence, 2011, 2016, 2021. Now here we are again. Do you think opposition activity is constantly or consistently being disrupted in urban areas based on that?
You know, when we reflect in the previous elections, there's a time even Kampala voters were denied the right to vote. Materials started arriving at 2. That was 2016. The Electoral Commission could not in any way explain the failure to dispatch electoral materials in Kampala. It has happened before. This was a deliberate, intentional move by Electoral Commission to deny voters in Kampala their right to vote. So when you start, and for the benefit of Afanda Wichi, the group which was told not to observe in Kampala is an internationally recognized group. I just don't want to mention, because I know when you hear stories of what people who have applied to observe elections, for the record, when we were denied the right to do vote education, we never bothered with the Electoral Commission again. Because if you can deny an institution registered to do vote education, because that's part of our registered mandate, with our own funding, and you don't allow us to sensitize people, why should I bother with the rest of your processes? So most of the NGOs stopped at that. The few who have gone beyond, they have received multiple calls from several security agencies. You have said you want to observe elections. I'm calling from Mumbuya. I'm calling from Kororo. Why do you want to observe elections? So people have been going through this trauma. Now, in observation of elections, people choose where they want to observe elections. You don't tell them that because there is AU, I've also met that AU advanced team. Everybody has met them. That because there is AU, is this the first election where AU is coming to observe elections? They've always been there. So observers choose where they want to observe elections. You can ask them their reasons. That you can ask, but you don't tell them where to observe elections. So this group was told, remove, take back your application, remove Kampala and Wakso. The opposition must open their eyes. What is the intention? Given that previously, Kampala has been denied the right to vote by Electoral Commission. So what are they planning this time round? You must be very alert in Kampala and Wakiso.
On that note, do you also believe that there could be some internal weaknesses within the opposition that are actually causing them to be this vulnerable to the crackdown that we're seeing?
Well, opposition in Uganda, maybe to go where Afanda which started from, that there's freedom in Uganda. There's artificial freedom in Uganda. There's negative peace actually in Uganda. Because if you look, let's use the example of accreditation to do vote education, or closure of NGOs, closure of radios, suspension of media journalists, suspension of talk show hosts. The list is endless. This government has been controlling freedom of expression, association. If they had capacity, they would even control freedom of thought. Maybe they will create robots. If you look at the civic space, context of civic space, which is internationally marked as regressed. So what freedom are you talking about? By several international reports. You can talk about the World Justice Report, you can talk about the World Civicus Monitor, you can talk about the governance reports, international. Everybody says freedom in Uganda is regressed. So how can then we claim that NRM ushered freedom? There is negative peace in Uganda. Opposition parties are highly constrained in their operations. including funding, state funding that was now denied to the National Unity Platform, and the other parties are free to use resources on baseless arguments. If you look at the raids on the National Unity Platform offices, if you look at the disruption of FDC, if you look at the 1-year incarceration of Dr. Besigyan and what has happened to his party, what freedoms are we talking about? They don't exist.
Okay. Major, you have been with the UPDF, so security is at your fingertips. You breathe security, you sleep security, you wake up security. With the scenes that erupted yesterday, how would you assess the management of Uganda police of yesterday's incidences in Kawempe South and North?
Well, that is a specific question on the event and the management of the event. Unfortunately, I don't have the details, but still, I know the management of the police in this activity, what it is supposed to be and what it is. In that, first and foremost, under campaign system, the commander-in-chief, in quotes and quotes, the forces that are being used in election, the commander-in-chief, in quotes and quotes, is the chairman, Electoral Commission. And the import of UPDF is by a provision of the law that should the police be thin on the ground, they will call UPDF. And even when they are called, the terms of the engagement rules are purely for crowd control. Of course, under the engagement rule, there's what you call reasonable application of reasonable force. And sometimes courts have been at length to define what amount to a reasonable force. And that is why in those who are managing the incident, they use things like a crowd control system, like tear gas. So the management of an election procedure at this time is a preserve of the Election Commission, who has police. He has been given line to interface with the IGP. And in that, the import of the army is clear, as I've said. So I am, much as I'm not specific about the management of yesterday's events, because to be specific would mean I know what happened, I know what triggered, and I know the omissions or the commissions of police, which is not within my knowledge. But broadly speaking, that is a crowd control under this situation. Now, let me comment about whether or not there's a digress in governance. The governance is not separable with human rights. And as we know, and as Sarah knows, Uganda is under United Nations, which has periodic review. There's a period, every period, under which Uganda is supposed to subject itself to Geneva for being reviewed and seen. And in various instruments, economic and political, civil and political rights, and rights of the women, rights of the children. In no review has Uganda been seen as regress. And we voluntarily subjected ourselves there. If there is a review which comes through a document called or concluding observations, then somebody can bring it here. So about other NGOs around the world writing.
Okay.
Most NGOs are like news.
Staying on the subject matter of security, Major Awich, the heightened tear gas that we saw was at the rally itself. This is primarily where it was the designated place, according to the Electoral Commission and the party and Uganda police agreed upon. And them speculating the kind of numbers this party does attract, they believe that that was the space enough for them to hold, to gather their people and hold their rally. And that's where we saw the heightened tear gas. You have mentioned reasonable force. In this regard, was tear gas the most reasonable force that could be used to manage the crowds there, especially if there were crowds that were peaceful? Well,
as I told you earlier, that I don't have the specifics.
No,
and therefore
as a security analyst, really,
I can't determine the reasonability.
Yeah.
But
Okay, let me rephrase the question. What are the alternatives that Uganda police has to manage such big crowds when it comes to reasonable force?
Normally, you have seen in the training how they stand guard, okay? You see somehow police come and stand guard if you want to prohibit people from accessing an area you don't. But if the police stand guard and build a wall and they can't manage, that is when they use tear gas, because that prohibition would have failed. And as you can hear from other sentiments, is that there's an accusation of the people attacking the police. And if you tie it with my earlier comment that the president of NUP has also conceded that among them there are hooligans who attacked. And he has been saying, you ignore them, those are not us. Those are planted people, not us. That means it is an acceptance that there are hooligans indeed who attack police, and that is what it is alleged yesterday. So the controlling therefore comes when police can build a wall, but if they can't, then they use reasonable force. But I want to comment about the ferrying attendants. My colleague asked me my comment about the ferrying attendants because he said the people who got accident. It is true that people got accident. As I said earlier, we are following Electoral Commission guideline. So if you are given now, today, 25th, you are given a Kanungu as a district, that is what Electoral Commission has given you. President Museveni, you are in Kanungu. So it is incumbent upon us, the party, to say, since our party flag bearer has 1 day in Kanungu, how do we get as much as possible the leadership at least to attend in the various sub-counties or counties? Okay. And therefore, that is why we ferry. It is upon each an individual party or candidate. If, for example, candidate General Mugisha Muntu chose to go to a district.
I guess what Mr. Serunjaji was trying to make reference and comparison to is that in as much as you have done your mobilization through what you earlier shared with us as your strategies of public address systems and radios to get people to come to your presidential candidates' rallies, there's primarily organic numbers that are coming up and they just want to follow this presidential candidate for whatever their specific reasons are. But it begs the question, how does the NRM actually plan to regain trust in Kampala?
Yes, Kampala, like any other urban areas, has not been voting us. And I've always wondered, if they say we rig elections and we are such a strong rigging machine, how comes we don't rig in Kampala? And also to extend that, how comes in Central Region we lost, including our vice president losing election, or even President Museveni losing election? If we have this rigging machine, how do we choose to rig in other places and not? So back to Kampala. Kampala is an urban center like any other urban center. In fact, people should use it as a litmus test for our honesty. We lose, but what have we done now? We have done into poverty elevation, deliberate poverty elevation in Kampala. For example, what had been disturbing us is...
Those are taxpayers' money.
What has...
Kampala pays the highest tax.
Yes, if it is taxpayers' money, for example, every party puts a manifesto. Like if you put a manifesto PDM, you say, should you vote for me, I will put PDM. It is not that I'm putting in the manifesto, if Museveni wins, he will sell his cows in Rakatora. No, he will use government fund. And that is why people bought into that manifesto, that give us PDM. If we win, we give you PDM. It's not that if you win, I sell my cows in Rakatora and give you PDM. So why are you saying it is taxpayers? So what we have been, a challenge to us has been,
as if it's charity.
The challenge we have been having is, do you implement PDM at place of work or at place of residence? And that was a mishap we have had. Because somebody moves from Katwe to come and work in Nakasero Market. So are you going to give PDM where he has left in the morning? Or you're going to give PDM where he is at work? Okay. Therefore, this approach to urban areas, we have handled it to design government interventions in in poverty elevation. And before I take leave of urban, the honesty here is, we have, under NRM government, so many urban centers have been created. Town councils all over the country. Cities have been put in place. And yet we know the urban areas don't vote for us. Isn't this honesty? Wouldn't we have said, don't create more urban? Please don't create town council. Please don't create city. Because we'd be saying, should you create, they won't vote for us. But for all honesty, we still create and strengthen urban areas and only hope that we shall...
You create the urban areas, but you don't strengthen the urban areas. Otherwise, we wouldn't be having the catastrophes that we see in Kampala as a capital city. Later on, the other cities that you have created, Masaka, Arua, Soro, to mention but a few, they are still, you created them, but you gave them nothing. You give them peanuts, 1 billion Ugandan shillings to help them with the road network here and there. What much can you do? You don't even pay enough their employees. You don't pay them on time. So you cannot sit here a witch and tell us that you have created and strengthened the urban centers. You have done one, you have failed or still fail at the other. Dr. Sarah, as you come in to respond,
no, but first,
allow Dr. Sarah.
You seem
Dr.
to be.
Sarah, he has
we are three people in the ring
of election rigging. He has said that if they were not so good, they would be having election rigging in Kampala.
Yeah,
but rigging comes in so many variations. Talk to us as one who observes elections. What are the variations or the forms of rigging that people should be aware of?
We can use the Kawempe by-election as a demonstration of how NRM behaves in Kampala. How did they behave in the Kawempe by-election? Deploy members, I counted beyond 20. Deploy members, destroy ballot materials, drive your members, arrest all journalists, your colleagues, spent weeks in hospitals, beaten. That's how NRM behaves in urban centers. So what honesty is he talking about? I wanted to correct the impression that the National Unity Platform has hooliganism. NRM is running the ghetto structure by General Damurira.
In fact, that's what...
A military man, head of crime intelligence, is running a group of hooligans who drove their Egari. When President Museveni came to pick nomination forms, the chaos they caused, including assaulting the former, head of Afande Akuro, Gures, and many people that ended in hospital. So what organism are you talking about? Two, there was an issue of, NRM is free, that the UNPR review was okay. The UN was discussing the climax of abductions, the review of Uganda. Even the Attorney General quarreled in the session. The media issue, the clips were public. Abductions. Recently, your party chairman said he kept the Kenya human rights defenders in a fridge for 38 days. Is that the freedom you are telling the world about? Keeping people in a fridge. So when you look at that, these are sugar-coated things. The world watches and they know what happens in Uganda. So how does NRM rig in Kampala, Wakiso and Mukono? They rig technically. Like now when we are flashing a warning that the failure, the act of Electoral Commission to tell election observers that we don't want you to observe elections in Kampala and Wakiso, it is a red flag. It means they are trying to rig the elections technically in Kampala and Wakiso, and they don't want to be watched. So the opposition parties must watch out and deploy more agents in these areas to make sure that they can follow, because other observers are being kept away. When you look at their conduct generally, you fail to deliver polling materials. Voting closes at 4. You deliver polling materials at 2. Meaning that instead of people having 10 hours of voting, they have 2. Haven't you rigged the election technically? What honest are we talking about here?
Okay, all right. Mr. Serunjoji, closing remarks.
Yeah, my colleague here has just mentioned about the EC chairman being the commander. You have just had, just recently, the chairman of EC complaining about the behaviors of the forces, and they have never hidden it. They are still continuing to torture people and nope. When he talked about the importation of army, you say that police at a certain period, the police import army. Army were in Kawempe yesterday before even the police came. In fact, the army was deployed 2 days prior. 2 days prior, the army were in Kawempe. So how could you say that they are called, they are imported after failure by police to handle? They are just trying to advance. They are advanced. So he talked about police building a wall, guard walls. Was there an attempt to build the guard wall yesterday? They were never.
Before the tear gas.
Before the tear gassing. No.
We have never seen that guard wall.
I've never seen it here in Uganda. They just flash them, but they don't use them. So, and in fact, I want to support Doctor on the observers, how they are picked. They pick those who are friendly to them. That one is witnessed in Uganda.
All right.
And on the human rights, their president has a case as we talk now. The chairman of NRM has a case in ICC.
Mr. Serudoni, what is the commitment? What's the
then
commitment of the National Unity Platform to ensure that they avert this situation with the futuristic urban center rallies that the party candidate has?
What again? Come again?
What are the futuristic plans you have as the National Unity Platform, having seen what happened yesterday, to ensure that it doesn't repeat itself?
Yeah, first of all, I want to agree with my friend that he has confessed that in all urban centers, nobody votes them, and they lose. That's a confession, and I agree. It's just because people in centers are well organized. We organize and we make sure that so we are going to go on mobilizing. First of all, they have created many polling stations, and we are ready to go and gather our votes. We are going to be vigilant as we can, so, like we are in Kawempe North, to make sure that NRM this time around don't rig elections.
All right, it's the clock of 8:45, and that brings us to the end of this discussion. We can't make closing remarks. Elections haven't ended, Major Polawit. We are going to be back here to continue this discussion. So that brings us to the end of this discussion. We're going to be picking up from there as time builds up, and we watch more spaces as they unfold, especially for urban centers, as presidential candidates are drawing closer to the heart of the country, that is Kampala.